Looking for a degree program that rewards you for what you already know? At WGU, all of our bachelor's and master's programs are competency-based, allowing you to progress at your own pace. Washingtonians know how valuable time and money are, and so do we. At WGU, your hard work and experience can help you finish your degree faster and for less. Join a community of driven professionals from across the DMV who are unlocking new career opportunities today. See how your knowledge can give you an edge at wgu.edu.
Good afternoon. Getting right down to business here. Serious business. We're doing it live, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons, right after Guy Benson at 3, and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money. We are live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And yes, the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple iTunes, YouTube, all of your favorite podcast platforms. Breaking news in the past hour, President Trump announces Israel and Iran have agreed on a complete and total ceasefire. This after the U.S. joined Israel in attacking Iran's nuclear sites over the weekend with devastating bunker-busting bombs delivered by American bombers flown over Iran from the United States. It was a nervous start to the new week on Wall Street and the financial markets, with the price of oil in focus on concerns Iran might shut down the Strait of Hormuz, that critical waterway to the world's economy, with the movement of oil tankers there. President Trump spoke over the weekend at the White House, announcing Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. The damage assessment continues. The price of oil saw a seesaw session today, and so did stocks. In all this, the price of oil ended lower, and stocks ended the day higher. The price of oil fell as investors assessed the extent of Iran's retaliation. Brent crude in London fell about 7% to settle at 71 and change, while oil in New York closed at $68.51 a barrel, also lower on the day. The stock market, meanwhile, ended the day higher, with the Dow up nearly 400 points at the closing bell, the S&P 500 up 57, and the Nasdaq up nearly 200 points. President Trump today mocked the very weak response that Iran had launched some missiles at an American base in Qatar in retaliation for the U.S. strikes over the weekend. He thanked Iran for giving an early notice, preventing deaths or injuries there. Iran says a mighty attack was in response to U.S. aggressive action over the weekend. Investors, of course, watching how Iran might continue to respond to the U.S. strike on its nuclear facilities. For now, the Strait of Hormuz is open, and the price of oil has actually pulled back today, right now hovering at around $65 a barrel, down about $3 at 65 and change. We also saw cryptos rebound in a big way today. In fact, Bitcoin here is up about $2,200, back to 105,463 here at last check, and Ethereum also higher at 2,417. Watching the latest headlines coming out of the Middle East very, very closely. Also, we're watching what's happening with the Federal Reserve this week. We heard from a Federal Reserve governor today expressing support for a rate cut as soon as July. That was Michelle Bowman today, becoming the second central bank policymaker to express that idea of a rate cut in July. We'll be hearing from Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. He'll be on Capitol Hill tomorrow for the first of 2 days of congressional testimony. We saw Tesla stock get a pop today of about 8% after the robo-taxi launch in Austin, Texas. Tesla shares moving higher. We'll take a closer look at that coming up. And, of course, we'll watch what's happening with the bank stocks as well, with some changes to bank regulation in the works. Hims & Hers stock plummeted about 30% today after Novo Nordisk announced it was ending a collaboration to make its blockbuster weight loss drug Wegovy available on the Hims telehealth platform. Nervous time in Washington, too, over the big, beautiful tax bill. We'll get an update from Grover Norquist this hour, president of Americans for Tax Reform, who was the keynote speaker last week at an L.A. taxpayers event right here in Los Angeles. LA-tax.org is their website. Grover Norquist will be joining us live later this hour. On the oil front, we'll be speaking live later this hour with John Kilduff, one of the leading oil analysts. John Kilduff at Again Capital, also CNBC contributor and longtime contributor to this program, will be joining us live. But right now, joining us live, top-ranked money manager Ken Winans, President and Chief Investment Officer, Winans Investments, winansinvestments.com. Ken Winans is also a market historian, author of numerous books, also Forbes magazine contributor, has his crypto credentials too. Most importantly, host of Winning with Winans, heard every Monday evening at 6 p.m. right here on your favorite station, 790 KABC. Good afternoon to you, Ken Winans.
My good friend Frank Mottek, my oh my, do we have a lot to talk about today.
Yes, sir.
But let me get started with this. I think that a lot of people, I am a financial historian. I've written many books. I'm not trying to self-promote my books, but I do think that the people who continue to find themselves floundering in this market, not knowing what to do, very partisan perceptions on things. All through the weekend, obviously I monitor the news very closely, but I had to remind several people, if you did not know the way it's being portrayed in certain factions of the press, I had to remind several people who live in California, whether they remember it or not, or were even alive back then, but Ronald Reagan attacked these oil platforms in the middle of the Persian Gulf that had what we call the Iranian silkworm missiles as they were targeting our tankers. He blew the crap out of those things. And so this is not the first time we've had a president go after Iran when they threaten our commercial interests. So again, I've had to remind people of that. And then sadly, it was one of the big reasons that I wrote the book. And by the way, look, it's not a moral conviction. I went to church yesterday, a lot of prayers about peace. But the simple fact of the matter is when you have effective military executed campaigns, the market typically goes up, not down. You can go back to the War of 1812. You can look at it throughout my book. You can see just when things really turn is when the market takes off. So anybody caught off guard by the market's action today, I would just simply tell them it's time for them to become less of a political hack and more of a historian to try to get on the right side of this thing.
On there live with Ken Winans, WinAnsInvestments.com. And by the way, his latest book is Investment Atlas 3, Creating Wealth Using Historical Trends. And you just reminded me, President Reagan back in those days not only protected our ships, but also reflagged Kuwaiti tankers. Remember that when that happened to protect Kuwaiti tankers going through the Strait of Hormuz. So strong leadership certainly does make a difference here. And it was a pretty nervous day today, waiting for Iran to respond to the devastating attacks on Iran's nuclear program by the U.S. And Israel. And certainly we're going to be focusing on oil quite a bit here. Oil in all this moving lower, Ken Winans.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is that gold actually held on to its value and silver moved up today. So again, anybody who is thinking that the metals are overpriced, if there was ever a time for these things to sell off, usually gold and oil, you can find times in history when they move in tandem. You mentioned what was going on with crypto. I think it's safe to say that there's a lot more strength to this market than a lot of people are giving credit for. And the only other thing, Frank, that caught my, it's not a big surprise. Oil stocks had a rough day, but not all of them. If you look at the companies that are primarily tied to U.S. domestic production, they actually weathered the storm very well. I mentioned not long ago that one of the stocks that I was buying is a company called Altero Midstream. It's primarily domestic, but the stock was a goose egg for the day. Same can be said about Williams, another one of my holdings. But Frank, I think one of the things I wanted to bring up, and it goes back to the Magnificent Seven. As of right now, I think a lot of people that are still holding on to, what worked last year will work this year. As you're coming up on the end of the mid-year and you meet with your advisors, you need to start asking some very serious questions. When I look at today, what were the stocks that were down today? Google down 1, Amazon down 1. They're down on the year. They're down on an up day. And then you go and look at Apple. Apple was even on the day, down 20% on the year. I'm just simply suggesting that this Magnificent Seven play is over. And people need to, it's not too late to still have a good year, but you need to start pivoting. And I would suggest go back and read my latest Forbes article about buying the Trump era stocks. It's not to gloat. It's not to say you're wrong. Our job on the show is to try to help people make money. But holding on to that, and if you have an advisor that's been subscribing to these, I think, crazy beliefs, you need to have some soul searching right now. You really do.
All right, what about Tesla on that robo-taxi rollout popping today, more than $26, all of a sudden back to just shy of $350 here?
It's interesting. We always said that Tesla just needed that new thing. Now, Frank, I don't know about you, but I'm going to be reluctant to hop into a driverless taxi. After what happened with the Waymos, certainly when they first tried this stuff and they're stopping in the middle of boulevards. But the simple fact of the matter is the people in Austin, Texas, and the government itself believe in this. And that's going to help Tesla a great deal. So if the pilot market works well there, I think that it's very possible, as we've seen time and time again. Tesla has an amazing way of coming back very, very strong. And this might be the next thing to come around. But let's say that I think Frank Mottek and Ken Winans will be on the later half of that testing ridership. I'm certainly not willing to do it yet.
Yeah, they say it's safer than having a driver. That's what they say. I don't necessarily believe that, but that's what they say.
You know what? For somebody who lived in the San Francisco Bay Area and where we have the lane-changing pylons, I've seen firsthand driverless Teslas literally getting lost and can't decide which lines to follow. Sorry, Frank. I'm going to be a little ways coming down the road on this thing.
All right, speaking of down the road, what about the Fed meeting coming up here? And now a couple of Fed heads expressing support for a rate cut this summer. Do you think that's going to happen? And, of course, the tech stocks historically are very interest rate sensitive. What do you think is going to happen as far as the Fed's next move, and what might we expect to hear from the Fed chairman tomorrow?
We all have to remember Jerome Powell is on. Now that's officially under 1 year. And there are several other Fed appointees that are going to be coming up on the block that the Trump administration is going to make appointments for. Here's my problem. They are wedded to the belief that tariffs cause inflation. They have gone through long years of education, indoctrination of that structure, and you can find cases of it historically. Art Laffer, who's a regular on your show, Frank, he is also very concerned about it. I just don't think it's going to play through the same way this time. But so getting back to your original question, I think we're going to have the Fed see several more months of very muted inflation data coming from multiple sources. And then, the other thing I brought up a couple of times, I really don't trust government statistics right now as far as I could throw them. Things in Washington are in flux. Data gathering is questionable. I'm really watching more what's going on with the market and what's going on with individual companies than I am aggregate data. But if the Fed gets a couple more months through the summer of really things just not showing up, I think they might be inclined to do it in the fall, but I don't expect it until then.
It is to be noted that the Tel Aviv stock market hit record highs after the U.S. Hit Iran nuclear sites over the weekend, and that's certainly big news. The fact that shares in Israel hit a record high following all this action.
And that's after the Tel Aviv stock market was actually hit by a missile. My credit to that group on getting everything back online. It's really quite amazing. But Frank, there is that general sense of optimism in the world. Even in countries, when I go down and look at the foreign ETFs, you can make a case that they have had a very good year. Now, granted, you look at 18 months, they're still very mediocre. But again, today, it was also very mixed. You had, France was down today, Germany was down today, Italy was down today. A lot of it was the dollar. The dollar's coming back strong. Mexico had a horrible day today on their ETF. So again, I think anybody who's buying into this, I better sell my great U.S.-based stocks and buy all this foreign stuff. Again, I would just encourage you to go, forget what I have to say, go back and look at history. The track record on these investments, as a U.S. investor, somebody who lives in dollars, lives in the United States, pays U.S. taxes, these have not been a good play for you in the long term. You can make money as a trade, but they're not great in the long term as an investment.
All right, what about crypto, which has seen quite a wild ride in the last several days? Got, I think, cracked below 100,000 for Bitcoin. Right now it's back to above 105,000 here, and not too long, it was just about a month ago that it hit a record high close to 112,000. What do you see ahead for Bitcoin here?
I think that when the Senate passed that Genesis litigation last week, that changed the game, Frank. And I know you and I talked about it. We are seeing that shift in the deregulation or the reconfiguration of the regulatory landscape in the financial industry of America. Started with that. I think we're going to have a lot more to come as we go through the fall and certainly going into next year. You know, we all have to remember, we're still very early in this administration and this administration's commitment to crypto. I think there's more to come. But one thing I have told people, I mean, I've had a lot of talk about people about the wallet situation and the hacking problems and the ransom and all this stuff. Again, there's some really good stocks that are tied to crypto industry you can buy. Just buying a utility right now, they're going to be producing power for these miners and certainly the AI play. And I think AI and crypto are going to have a much tighter tie as we go through the next 24 months. I think there's going to be a lot more of that. But no, Frank, my only thing right now is that I'm looking at it as a technician. I'm looking very glaringly at that 111,000 mark on Bitcoin. It's very strong resistance, and I want to see it pop through that on very, very heavy volume, and then I'll say, okay, we're ready for the next rung. But I think for the rest of this year, that 2025 is going to be a year of shifting around and getting ready for the big show, which is I think going to be 26 and 27. But it's getting everything in place now to be able to take advantage of that. But no, I mean, clearly I believe that crypto is going to be part of our society. Whether you like it or not, you better learn about it.
All right, FedEx, the founder of FedEx passed away over the weekend, a U.S. Marine. A lot of tributes, big salutes to him. And the earnings news from FedEx will be coming out tomorrow, I believe. FedEx, of course, a harbinger on the economy. What do we expect tomorrow from FedEx?
You know, it's interesting about FedEx. First off, Fred Smith, God bless his soul. This man was one of those pioneers. Everybody laughed at him when he started FedEx. They thought he was crazy to take on the U.S. Postal Service. Now today we look at it and we think, really? It took that long? Here's the thing. FedEx and UPS are in this are in this interesting battle because when Amazon decided to get into the shipping business, that changed their dynamic entirely. The fact that DHL has been pulling up stakes all over the world. I mean, I get notices because I have a DHL account, and we're no longer doing, American packages into Canada. We're no longer doing U.S. packages into this country and that country. Whether FedEx and UPS can say, okay, we're going to go clean DHL's lunch. We're going to go after that business. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what they come up with. But the big thing they all say, Frank, is cost of fuel right now. It's cost of deliveries. It's all the other, the hacking problems, the theft problems. They're all dealing with the same mess. But we'll see what happens. I am of the opinion that the whole transportation thing, which had been in this kind of, whipsaw all over the place, whether it's rail, plane, trucks, you name it, things are calming down. Things are settling down. And I think the last half of the year will really tell us if these companies are on track or are they behind the curve, like many of them were during COVID.
Very interesting. It should be noted DHL, which was an American company many years ago, was bought by the German postal system, by the way. Deutsche Post owns DHL now and has for many, many years, a government entity running DHL. So that is to be noted. And Ken Winans, any specific places at this point, given so many moving parts here around the world, where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, I mean, I brought up earlier, I really do. And look, I have nothing personal against Google or Amazon. I'm just simply bringing up, I am trying to make money. I'm an investor. I want to make money. And when I look at these two stocks in particular, down on an up day, Apple having its problems, I mean, I think people need to just, again, unless you have big tax problems because you've had big gains with these things through the years, you need to pivot. And I think that especially looking at how the industrial stocks are really beginning to look, I've really been impressed with, although we can say that all is done with what's happened in Iraq and with Israel. I think I still find a lot of people who are very, very short on defense stocks. Take a look at Kratos Defense, symbol KTOS. It's a niche play. One of my favorites, go back to the Wright brothers' days, the last vestige of them, Curtiss Wright, symbol CW. This stock has quietly moved up and met everything. Another one, just again, names people don't even know of, Howmet, symbol HWM. My point is, look for those niche players in an area that's clearly a growing area. And when you look at, we have the NATO conference coming up. President Trump is telling these guys, you are going to start spending more on defense. Companies like this will make a lot of money on that. So, I think go after industrials, and I like defense stocks right now.
Terrific, Ken. Well, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon. Looking forward to continuing the conversation with so much to talk about at 6 o'clock this evening on Winning with WINANS. You can join us live this evening at 6 o'clock this evening right here in 790 KABC. Top-ranked money manager Ken Winans, President and Chief Investment Officer at Winans Investments at winansinvestments.com. Ken Winans, also a market historian, author of numerous books. His latest, Investment Atlas 3, Creating Wealth Using Historical Trends, also Forbes magazine contributor. So be sure to check out his latest article. And we'll continue the conversation tonight at 6 right here on Winning with Winans, heard every Monday evening at 6 p.m. on 790 KABC. Ken, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
My pleasure, Frank. Talk to you tonight.
Thank you very much. All right, let's get out to the freeways now on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues 790 KABC. Good afternoon. Nervous day in the financial markets, but at the end, oil lower, stocks higher, and President Trump announcing Israel and Iran have agreed on a complete and total ceasefire after the U.S. joined Israel in attacking Iran's nuclear sites over the weekend. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 375 points at 42,582. The S&P 500 of 57 at 6,025. The Nasdaq up 184 at 19,631. The yield of the 10-year note is back down to 4.35% after another Fed governor today signaled lower rates could be ahead this summer. The volatility index moving lower today by 4%. Gold also pulling back, down nearly $22 here at the moment at $3,373 and change. Silver also lower today, just below $36 an ounce. Crude oil hovering at around $65 a barrel now, down nearly $3 at $65.54 a barrel. Crypto's moving higher. Bitcoin up more than 2,200 at 105,400 or so. Ethereum at 2,400, just above 2,400. Solana at 145 and Doge at 16 cents. Tesla getting a pop today on its new driverless vehicle, up more than $26 at $348.68. And now the latest news here on 790 KABC.
Looking for a degree program that rewards you for what you already know? At WGU, all of our bachelor's and master's programs are competency-based, allowing you to progress at your own pace. Washingtonians know how valuable time and money are, and so do we. At WGU, your hard work and experience can help you finish your degree faster and for less. Join a community of driven professionals from across the DMV who are unlocking new career opportunities today. See how your knowledge can give you an edge at wgu.edu.
I am Michael Rosenbaum.
I am Tom Welling.
Welcome to Talkville,
where it's fun to talk about Smallville.
We're going to be talking to sometimes guest stars.
Are you liking the direction Lois is going in?
Yeah, because I'm getting more screen time.
It's good.
But mostly it's just me and Tom remembering.
I think we all feel like there was a scene missing here.
You got me, Tom.
Let's revisit it. Let's look at it. See what we remember.
See what we remember.
I had never been around anything like that before. I mean, it was so fun.
Talkville.
Talkville.
I just had a flashback.
Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Let's get into it.
Mottek On Money continues here 790 KBC, watching what's happening in the Middle East. Also, what's happening in Washington. Nervous time in Washington over the big, beautiful tax bill. It happens to be a big week for that bill this week. A lot of attention focused on what's happening there. Let's get an update now from Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform, who was the keynote speaker last week at a Los Angeles taxpayers event right here in the City of Angels last week. Grover Norquist, thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you at the event and the taxpayer group growing in California.
That was wonderful to see you, and you did a fantastic job there describing what was happening in Washington and fast-changing developments, of course. And the Los Angeles Taxpayer Organization, la-tax.org, is their website. Did a fantastic job bringing us all together. So it was wonderful to see you here in the City of Angels. What was your message to the group the other night, and where do things stand here at the moment?
Sure. The good news is that the Republican tax bill from 2017, which cut tax rates for everybody who paid taxes, upper income, middle income, lower income, small businesses, big businesses. Rates came down for everyone. The per-child tax credit increased. They made it easier for people to file and not have to keep so many pieces of paper by increasing the standard deduction. And it allowed businesses to expense new investment, which means rather than with long depreciation schedules, you can depreciate. If you're going to spend $1 million buying new trucks for a company or expanding the building, you expense that million, meaning you don't count it as income because it isn't income. You just spent it. Whereas before you had long depreciation schedules where you pretended it was income and you only depreciated over 10, 20 plus years. So it reduces the cost of making workers more productive, and that's why you saw wages go up in 2018 and 2019 as a result of the tax cut. All of those things will be made permanent. Permanent. That means businesses looking to invest, to hire more people, to put more plant and equipment out. They know what the rules are going to be 5 minutes from now, 5 years from now, 50 years from now. Very, very important to get growth going. And that's a huge step forward. Without that, every 5 or 10 years, you have to go back and negotiate with the Democrats whether or not to continue a tax cut. And they'll go, well, we'll only continue that tax cut if you give us this spending or this amount of tax increases over here. So it protects taxpayers. It protects us from overspending and going into debt further. Extremely helpful. And the other good news, and I talked about it at the other night, was that there will be 2 more reconciliation packages, one in November, December, and one in the spring. So the reason we've got this bill and the Democrats can't stop it, because they could filibuster a regular law, is it for a budget, as long as you're reducing spending and taxes and you're looking out into the future, you're not changing the law, you're just changing the budget numbers, you can pass it with a simple majority in the House and a simple majority in the Senate. No filibuster to stop it. So there are a number of ideas, many that I like, that aren't in this bill. New ideas. But when we come to November, we can look to include them. One of the ones that's important to a lot of people in your listening audience and around the country is a measure which has passed the House, but is not yet in the Senate bill. May not make it this time. I know the White House likes it, and a lot of the people in the Senate like it, but the numbers are tight. Maybe it won't fit this time in July, but we could come back and get it in November. That expands how much money you can put in a health savings account, who can have a health savings account. About 20 million more Americans will have the opportunity. There are about 60, 70 million Americans covered by health savings accounts. That should be 100% should have that as an option. And this will make that project to make it easier for you to save for your health costs in the future in order to bid and have some control over the costs that you pay. I think that's a very important project that may well pass. You may hear in the next couple of days, yes, it passed, or you may hear, it didn't quite make it. We'll look at it for the next time.
On the air live with Grover Norquist, President of Americans for Tax Reform, and looks like this process is continuing to grind. What is the very latest here with this parliamentarian involved now, the so-called Byrd Rule and all kinds of other things we're hearing out of Washington and some parts may be taken out here that you've described? Where do things stand here, and might this be the week that it'll be approved before the 4th of July?
Yes, the Senate believes that they will be able to get this passed before the 4th of July. There will be some very long, they could start as early as this Thursday, and they'll put something on the floor, and then amendments will be put forward. And they can have as many amendments as you want. So you'll see the Democrats will put lots of amendments up to change this, that, or the other thing. They will fail. Almost all of them will fail. But the Democrats, in order just to, one, take up time, and also because they want to make little changes in it that would kneecap it, that would cripple the bill, the legislation, but then they would go back and say, oh, so-and-so wasn't for this piece of the bill. Well, that's not exactly true, but it's the way politics works. So yes, probably a vote that begins. There'll be literally hundreds of amendments. They will go all night, but it should start this Thursday, and we may be done by July 4th.
See it tonight. Read about it tomorrow, but hear it now on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC, live on the air with Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. And it certainly was a big, beautiful evening when you were here last week at that LA Taxpayers event. What are your impressions here of Los Angeles and California overall and the big issues Californians are facing on the tax front?
Well, as I said that evening, Frank, I grew up in Massachusetts. And I looked to California for leadership on the taxpayer movement. I know that sounds a little bit odd now, but California passed Proposition 13. It was the first tax revolt in a long time in American history, focused on property taxes, but it was followed by the Gann Amendment, which put a limit on total spending. If the Gann Amendment had not had a hole poked in it by Duke Majan, sadly a Republican governor who was under pressure from the teachers union, California today would have a balanced budget. California today wouldn't need an income tax because their spending would have grown less rapidly and they'd look more like Florida and less like New York. And they wouldn't have an unfunded situation with the pension situation. That's what, 40 years of growing no faster than inflation plus population gives you less government and lower taxes than if you just spend every penny that comes in, which is what California has done. But back in 1978, the whole nation looked at California. Many states passed measures very similar. Today, around the country, 12 states are phasing their income tax to zero. In the next 15 years, we'll have 20 states with no income tax. We already have 15 states that have a single rate tax. There are another 4 that are getting ready to pass that in the next several years to get to a flat rate tax. Those are very easy to reduce, flat rate taxes.
Grover, I wish we had more time. We'll have to stop there, but it was fantastic seeing you here. Hope to see you more often here in Southern California. Hope to see you in Washington as well one of these days. Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, was the keynote speaker last week at an LA Taxpayers event in Los Angeles. LA-tax.org, by the way, is the great group headed by Aidan Chow, and appreciate him bringing us together here. Grover, thank you very much for joining us live here on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC.
Looking for a degree program that rewards you for what you already know? At WGU, all of our bachelor's and master's programs are competency-based, allowing you to progress at your own pace. Washingtonians know how valuable time and money are, and so do we. At WGU, your hard work and experience can help you finish your degree faster and for less. Join a community of driven professionals from across the DMV who are unlocking new career opportunities today. See how your knowledge can give you an edge at wgu.edu.
The United States Soccer Federation presents the U.S. Soccer Podcast.
Inside the opening 45 seconds. What a goal!
Jack McGlynn with that cannon of a left foot.
Never miss a game.
What a start for the United States.
Shot from distance. What a goal!
Never miss a moment.
Exquisite from the San Diegan.
Can he finish? Yes, he can! Yeah!
The U.S. Soccer Podcast. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Dramatic developments in the Middle East over the past week or so, culminating over the weekend with President Trump announcing that the U.S. had struck Iran's 3 main nuclear enrichment facilities, saying the sites have been totally obliterated. We continue to monitor all of the latest headlines out of the Middle East, including the news this afternoon, which says the President announced Israel and Iran have agreed on a complete and total ceasefire after the U.S. joined Israel in attacking Iran's nuclear sites over the weekend. The price of oil in all of this spiked overnight, but pulled back today, closing lower. The stock market ended the day higher. Joining us live now is oil industry analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital and CNBC contributor. John Kilduff, thank you very much for taking this call this afternoon.
Frank, it's my pleasure to be on with you, especially during such historic moments. Yet again, this is another one of our historic get-togethers, it seems to me.
And give us your reaction to what's happened over the weekend, really over the past week, and the action we saw to kick off this week.
Frank, it's been an incredible round trip, actually. All the gains that got priced into oil over the worries about this Israel-Iran conflict have been removed. We've lost all of those gains now with the announcement by President Trump about the ceasefire. We're down another $3 a barrel for crude oil in overnight trading here. This has been an unbelievable turn of events. Something that was long overdue. We have watched in real time, really, the dismantling of Iran and its reign of terror in the Middle East for decades now. I personally can't believe how much we overestimated Iran's prowess militarily and otherwise. They were certainly good at mischief. They were certainly good at lobbing the occasional missile or funding this or that rogue group. The latest being the Houthis, but they have been finished off, Frank, and the Israelis did it. Remember you and I speaking several months ago about when the Israelis hit the Iranian missile defenses. It was just a matter of time before the rest of this got taken care of. And this really lowers the temperature and I think opens up a potentially new era for the Middle East. All the other countries, Qatar, you name them, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq even, they want to move forward. They want to have a great economy. They're done with the wars. This was sort of the last domino to fall. And this is going to usher in, I think, an era of stability out that way because Iran and its proxies, which includes Syria, by the way, I didn't mention, have all fallen one by one. And it's just an amazing time and I think a really great thing, for the global economy.
On the Air Live with oil industry analyst John Kilduff. Oil pulling back. It's now below $65 a barrel. You're looking at the computer screen there, John. Where do you expect the price of oil to go from here?
I think we'll settle down, Frank. I mean, we're not done yet. Obviously, President Trump gave this ceasefire deal several hours to kick in. There does appear to be some kind of event that occurred at the Taji military base in Iraq, north of Baghdad. So, we're not 100% out of the woods, but I think once everything settles down, the dust clears here, I would expect oil prices to head back down below $60 a barrel. There will be relief at the pump for everyone, maybe including Californians, although that's a stretch. But for the most part, look, the focus is going to be back on slowing economy in China, maybe even the slowing economy here in the U.S., that more and more voices are calling on the Federal Reserve to stoke it with an interest rate cut, which I think would be warranted at this point. That would help things. But for now, the Fed is off the hook inflation-wise because this oil price is just going to continue to ratchet lower pump prices, but also lower delivery costs. We know nothing is more menacing, really, to the consumer across the board than a spike in energy prices, oil prices, diesel fuel, gasoline, because obviously that's how everything gets to the store and to your house. So, again, I think we're in for a good stretch here.
Also, it should be noted, I see the president has put out a statement on social media. Everyone keep oil prices down. He said, I'm watching you. You're playing right into the hands of the enemy. Do not do it. And he wrote to the Department of Energy, drill, baby, drill. And I mean now. So are we expecting to see a pumping up of domestic oil production here now?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily in the cards, although I will say the administration is doing quite a bit to encourage more drilling, opening up more lands, giving environmental waivers, getting more pipelines approved and in the works. So there's more coming. I mean, the real saving grace right now is that OPEC itself is fearful of losing market share, even more market share losses to the United States producers. So they're in the process of increasing their oil production and output. So I think that's what we'll get. I will tell you that, in all of this, and you and I didn't have a chance really to speak, but these fears over the Strait of Hormuz being closed, with this Iran that we're looking at today, it's not even in the cards or on the table for me.
So much can happen still here, and we'll keep a line open to you, oil industry analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital, also CNBC contributor, and we greatly appreciate him being a longtime contributor to this program as well. Thank you very much for joining us live here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
Former U.S. Navy SEAL Sean Ryan captures real stories about sacrifice and strength.
We go into this hooch searching for Christ knows what.
Regardless if anybody else does it, will you do it?
There's a lot of things that are hurtful and disturbing.
Can't get anybody to talk about it.
Uncovering truth with the heroes who live to tell it.
There's a saying, there's no atheist in a foxhole.
That was the hardest part for you coming home.
What?
How'd you get through it?
I worked hard.
The Sean Ryan Show.
You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
Follow and listen on your favorite platform.